Welcome to Dominika Best Presents The Deviant Mind, a true crime podcast. This is Dominika Best, your host. I have always been interested in the mind and how we and our personalities can explode, damage, hurt, and even kill the people around us. It's why I've been an avid crime fiction reader all of my life, and now I'm a crime fiction author myself. True crime has always been the basis for so much of crime fiction because many times true events are incredibly insightful and also stranger than fiction. I'm not a therapist, but I do create characters for a living. I'm constantly digging deeper into what makes a person, how does their psychology drive their actions, and how do they affect the people around them. Why did they do what they did? These stories are integral to my fiction, and I'm looking forward to delving into the cases with you. Welcome to The Deviant Mind. Hello, friends. I know it's been about a month since my last podcast, and I apologize. I'm trying to really get into the rhythm of doing the research and putting out weekly episodes, which I'm hoping that this is the first of weekly episodes starting in 2023. And the case that I have for you today is one that has taken over the news cycle in the last 3 weeks, and an arrest has been made. Today, I am doing the Ana Walshe disappearance case, and I'm most likely going to go do the Idaho student murders next week, as they are both dominating the headlines here in the United States. There have been shocking developments in both of them, and there have been arrests. But the first this week is Ana Walshe. And I was able to find the probable cause affidavit that was put out in regards to the arrest of her husband, Brian Walshe, on essentially obstructing the investigation. However, yesterday, which it was January 17th, 2023, he was officially charged for her murder, even though they have not yet found her body. But let's go back to the beginning. So on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2022, so that was 3 weeks ago, Brian and Ana Walshe hosted a dinner with their friend Jem at their home in Cohasset, Massachusetts, about 30 miles southeast of Boston. Jem arrived at around 8:30 p.m. and left in the first hours of the new year at around 1:30 a.m. on January 1st. Supposedly, Ana was alive then. The couple went to sleep soon after, and Ana told her husband that she had a work emergency the next day and needed to fly back to DC in the morning. This is what the husband has said. The next morning, Ana got ready, gave her husband a kiss goodbye, and told him to go back to sleep. She usually took one of the ride services to the airport. She left between 6 to 7 a.m. and has never been seen again, according to her husband. Now, supposedly, a family member has said that they saw Ana leaving that morning, but that family member was Brian Walshe's mother, which we'll get into later in the episode. So according to police logs, Ana's phone connected for the last time to a cell tower on January 2nd at about 3:14 a.m., about 0.7 miles away from the couple's home. Now, Brian Walshe claimed he went to a juice bar in Norwell early on January 2nd, which is, I guess, close by to that cell tower. Police found video of Brian Walshe visiting a Home Depot in Rockland about 10 miles away from his home on January 2nd. He wore a black surgical mask and blue surgical gloves and bought $450 worth of goods, including cleaning supplies, mops, and tape. The head of security at the real estate company Tishman Speyer, which is where Ana Walshe worked, requested a wellness check on Ana at 11:45 a.m. on January 4th, 2023. She was supposed to be at work on January 3rd, and her car was still in Washington. And when they contacted the husband, he had not filed a missing person report on her. She had a plane ticket for January 3rd, and she was not on that plane. And her company had no idea she was coming in earlier, like supposedly her husband said to the police that she was supposed to be coming in January 1st. The Cohasset Police Department sent officers to Brian and Anna's home to conduct the welfare check on January 4th, 2023. Members of the Cohasset Police Department's Criminal Investigation Unit were soon called to search the home, as Mrs. Walshe was now a missing person. A ground search began on January 5th in the woods behind the Walshe home. It was suspended on January 7th. The tip lines had police aggressively tracking down leads. On January 8th, police returned with a search warrant for the Walshe home. They also arrested Brian Walshe on charges he misled their investigation because he lied about his whereabouts. He was under house arrest at the time that this was all happening for a fraud charge that was still pending sentencing. So he had to get special permission to leave the house, and he had gotten special permission to go help his mother with groceries on January 2nd, not to go to Home Depot and get cleaning supplies. Brian was arraigned on January 9th, and he is being held in custody on $500,000 bail, and he pleaded not guilty. Now, they on misleading the investigation, not for her murder as of that date. Prosecutors had stated that they found blood and a damaged bloodstained knife in the couple's basement. They also searched the areas that Brian had been. They scoured dumpsters and landfills, and so far, they'd uncovered possible evidence, including a hacksaw and apparent bloodstains in Boston area trash. Law enforcement also stated that Brian's internet history had searches for how to dispose and dismember of a body. To date, again, her body has not been found. And again, it seems to be the downfall of a lot of murderers these days about their search histories, because they don't seem to know that is kept in history and that you can erase it. And it's not a good sign that you are typing in how to dispose of a 115-pound woman's body and how to dismember it properly, which is apparently what was typed into his search. So, some background on Ana Walshe, his wife. She was a 39-year-old real estate professional, and she had 3 young boys at the time of her disappearance with Brian Walshe. She was born in Belgrade, Serbia, and she held a bachelor's in French language and literature from Belgrade University. She emigrated from Serbia in 2005 and worked in the hospitality industry, first in Virginia, then in New York City. She moved to Massachusetts in 2008 and worked as a reservations manager for the Wheatley Hotel as a reservations manager in Lenox. This is where she met Brian Walshe, supposedly. And there's tons of pictures of her on Facebook and Instagram because her accounts are all open. And for all intents and purposes, this was a gorgeous woman at the prime of her life with the perfect family. They were very wealthy. She had houses all over. I guess the family had houses all over the Massachusetts area. They had just bought a house in Washington, D.C. Now, as I said, this case is all over the news with lots of friends and family talking about her. And one of those friends was Alyssa Kirby, who gave an interview for Boston 25 that she'd gone dancing with Ana over the Christmas break and that the family was going through a lot of stress in regards to Ana needing to be in D.C. often and missing her kids and wanting to see them more. Kirby mentioned the couple were fighting, but that Ana gave no indication of being in danger. Now, it's interesting that she would say that because I also went onto a bunch of Reddit forums, which, again, can always be a little tricky to find information from there. But they were saying that she was seemingly having money problems and trying to get rid of some of the property that she owned in Massachusetts. There was a couple who had given an interview for one of the local newspapers saying that they had spoken to her about a week before New Year's Eve, and she was essentially trying to get them to move because she needed to sell the house. And when they said that they couldn't, she lost it. So I'm wondering if there were a lot more money problems than anybody really knew about. So Brian, her husband, had a lot of struggles. And at the same time, his wife seemingly was really standing by his side. So I will get into Brian's legal troubles after this part with Ana, but Ana wrote letters to the judge in regards to his sentencing, which is what he was under house arrest for, because he was found guilty on federal charges for art forgery, mail fraud. So she wrote a letter to the judge saying, as Brian's wife, this isn't back in 2021, Brian has been deeply affected by his childhood and relationship with his parents. He was taught to lie and hide. He was told that he was a loser, that his parents should not have had him, that he had no chances of making anything of himself in life, and that he was a lost cause. He, and this is again a direct quote from the letter, Brian has expressed to me on many occasions his regret for his past actions. He has a big heart and he impacts everyone around him in a way that will surpass the present moment. He has been the leader to our family and an inspiration to all he comes into contact. It really seemed like she cared for this man and stood by his side, again, per the letters. It's hard to imagine that he could have hurt her. And again, the evidence that was stated in the probable cause affidavit was everything that I said before. And I'm not sure if they got any new information to put him actually under arrest for her murder yesterday. They haven't really come out and said, outside of the fact that he was now being charged with her murder. So his behavior, again, he looks a little bit suspect. And quite frankly, he matches the profile of a family annihilator where they are con men who tend to get caught by their wife in some way and they kill them. Thank goodness that he didn't hurt the kids, but his past actions are definitely suspect with his history. And so I'm going to get into that. And this is everything that I found in news articles. And I will have, as always, every source listed in my show notes. So Brian Walshe was born in Cohasset, Norfolk, Massachusetts on August 17th, 1976 to a pretty well-off family. His father, Thomas M. Walshe, was a renowned neurosurgeon in Boston. He headed up Women's Hospital. He also taught at Harvard University and was a published author. His mother, educated in science and engineering, came from generational wealth, and I scoured the internet to see if I could find what family she was from, but I could not find her maiden name. So if anybody knows it, please leave on the Instagram. I have an Instagram, which is the Deviant Mind Podcast. Leave me a DM if you are able to find it. And she had her own share of, it seems like, mental troubles. From court documents that the Boston Globe reporters Dugan Arnett and Brandon McCarthy found through his federal case trial into art fraud, they found that his childhood was beset with emotional abuse from his mother, who was a recluse, and his father, who liked to party. In the court documents, psychiatrist reports that stated Brian was neglected, emotionally damaged, and his parents divorced in 2003. Brian attended boarding school in Rhode Island and was enrolled briefly at. He apparently had a breakdown while at Carnegie Mellon and ended up checking himself into Austin Riggs, which is a high-end mental health facility in the Berkshires. He left that facility before he wanted to because his parents wouldn't settle on who was going to pay for his treatment. And per the records, the facility actually sued the parents for the payment. After the stint at the mental hospital, he went jumping from school to school. He studied at the University of Mass at Amherst, Northeastern University, and the JFK School of Government at Harvard University. From the court records, he also appears to have worked as a personal concierge for a wealthy family, traveling the world, making jewelry and art purchases. So he was very comfortable in this very specific wealthy society and really felt like he should belong there. From a Boston Globe article that I mentioned earlier, the reports got a story from a source about an arrangement that Brian made with his father. In the early 2000s, Brian approached his father about a real estate deal. Brian had recently taken over a deed and mortgage payments on a dilapidated home, and he wanted help from his dad. They agreed that if the dad paid for the renovations, then when the house was sold, he would only take out what he put in for the reservations and Brian could keep the rest to officially start his life. So Brian's father poured in more than $500,000 into those renovations and the home was refinanced. On the night of the closing, Brian and his dad agreed that Brian was going to send his dad a check per their agreement for the $500,000. However, that night, Brian disappeared with all the money. And according to court filings, Thomas's dad didn't hear from Brian for the next 10 years. So looks Brian took off with about $1 million. And $500,000 of that was at least his father's. From various reports from friends, lawyers' letters, and court filings, Brian borrowed large sums of money from friends to never return the money to them. He would attend very expensive dinners and have his friends foot the bill. He even used the email of a friend to pretend to be someone's CEO from the company that his friend worked at, which then, of course, landed his friend in a lot of trouble. Brian was accused of writing bad checks and taking and keeping any money that came his way. There was some talk about a condo that he had lived in, and when there were checks sent from the previous people that lived there, he just kept the checks. And supposedly, and this is over a lot of articles online at this point, that his records were leaked from Austin Riggs, and supposedly he was diagnosed as a sociopath. Brian and Ana were married in the middle of all of this, and he seems to have kept on scheming. In 2021, he admitted in federal court of selling fake Andy Warhol paintings to Ron Rivlin, owner of the Warhol-focused Revolver Gallery in Los Angeles, for $80,000. And unfortunately, Ana was connected to this fraud, but she wasn't officially charged by the FBI. Her eBay account in 2016 offered up 2 Warhols for sale. This information was from an affidavit by FBI Special Agent Kristen Koch. Ana Walshe had contacts with the victims as well. The FBI asked for her fingerprints and DNA, but the trail ended there, and as I said, she was never charged. Brian, however, pleaded guilty in April 2021 in U.S. District Court in Boston to 1 count each of wire fraud, interstate transportation for a scheme to defraud, possession of converted goods, and unlawful monetary transaction. Before a judge was about to hand down a sentence, prosecutors argued that he'd violated the terms of his pre-sentence release by not disclosing how much money he actually had. He didn't want to pay restitution to his victims and lied to the probation officials. He had not disclosed the $512,289 he had received from his mother as payments to his attorneys. He also didn't disclose household assets like his 2015 Maserati, several pieces of real estate, and lied about what money he received from his father's estate, which was also a huge contention, his father's estate. So there was a big lawsuit when his father died in 2018 in India because Brian was fully cut out of his father's will. However, by accident, he had been made the executor of his will for a couple of weeks, and he apparently took that upon himself to steal cash from the house, car, luxury items, including expensive paintings like pieces by Salvador Dali and Joan Miro from his father's estate. And then he also attempted to sell the father's beachfront home, which was worth over $800,000. And investigators really believe he most likely committed fraud and embezzlement when it came to his father's estate. And he claimed he didn't have access to the funds, where he apparently did. So during his sentencing, relatives and his friends and Ana wrote to the judge saying that he was a devoted father, he loved helping others, and Ana wrote those letters in support of her husband that I read earlier. So around this time, Ana got a job at Tishman Speyer, which was a major real estate firm with a great salary and benefits, but the job was in D.C. Because Brian couldn't join her due to his legal issues, like I mentioned before, she bought a $1.3 million home in D.C. in the very fancy Chevy Chase neighborhood and spent the week in D.C. and would fly home on the weekends. Brian and the 3 kids moved into a home rented by his mother in Cohasset. And I've never been to Cohasset, but from all reports, it is a very wealthy town east from Boston. It sounds like it's a Boston suburb. He took care of his sons and his mother during the week when Ana wasn't in town. Now, his mother, Diana Walsh, has said in all the reporting that and this is a direct quote, the only reason I get up in the morning and the only person to take care of me, and he is always there for me, which is she was talking about her son, Brian. Diana Walsh also stated, quote, unfortunately, I do not have a good relationship with my daughter-in-law, she said. Quote, perhaps due to cultural differences, unquote. Now, supposedly she's the family member that saw Ana alive that morning on January 1st, which of course has really come into question because from everything that I've seen, her son can do no wrong, and he has obviously done quite a bit wrong. So Ana Walshe's mother, Milanka Lujubicic, which I probably pronounced incorrectly, and I very much apologize, told Fox News that her daughter had pleaded with her to come to the U.S. in late December, just a week before her disappearance. And the mother said that there were clearly problems in the marriage. So right now, the prosecutors have blood and a bloodied knife from the basement of the couple's home. They also have footage of him buying cleaning supplies after his wife was seen. And investigators have been scouring trash in hazmat suits at a bunch of dumpsters at the Swampscott apartment complex where Walshe's mother lives, because again, Brian was under house arrest. So he had to gain permission from the court to leave his house to go run errands for his mother, because that's what he did every week. And as I said before, he apparently Googled how to dispose of a 115-pound woman's body. And I'm wondering if the investigators, of course, they're keeping it close to their vest until the trial, what else they have found, because they have not found Ana's body. And that is going to be hard for them to prosecute this case. That's always what you hear is if there's no body, there's no crime, because it's easy to poke holes in a prosecution's case if there's no body. Maybe she just took off. And there's definitely been a lot of speculation online whether she left him. And again, this is just completely internet gossip, but because this case has been so big, people are wondering if she was going to leave him and take the kids with her. Supposedly the house in Washington had bedrooms already ready for her. She was really missing her children. She didn't want to keep commuting the way that she was. And apparently they needed to have money to keep up their very lavish lifestyle. There was also talk about her maybe having an affair, but again, this is just internet gossip, and I would never want to sully the name of a woman who I personally believe is probably dead. And there's talk about the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath, and they are actually different. So a sociopath is a person that has a personality disorder, that has extreme antisocial attitudes and behavior and a lack of conscience, which, as we talked about Brian's life, you can see that he had no problem swindling people and taking money that was not his own and didn't really care about the repercussions. And that is just ripe for him potentially seeing Ana as someone who, if she was planning to leave him, was going to be more of a liability than an asset, because before she was the loving wife, she was standing behind him. If she was actually going to leave him and take the children, what would he have? He would have nothing. Now, his mother has gone on record to say that he was the perfect husband. He really took care of those kids, and definitely throws shade at Ana, being like, what business do you have leaving your children for the whole week and just coming back on the weekends? And supposedly the mother would move in during the week to live with Brian and his children while Ana was away. So it definitely sounds like there was a mama's boy sort of situation, and there was some papers who had talked about mental issues on her side that they've never really discussed. And as I said, she's looked everywhere and I could not find anything about her. And she is very fascinating to me because she paid for his $500,000 for his art forgery trial, which he actually did do the art forgery for. He pled guilty. Ana was involved in that. And she still thinks that her son is amazing and he does nothing wrong. What I find fascinating is that she has so much money. Why does he need to run his schemes? And there was a podcast that was, I think it was called Red Collar, and it was about white collar crime and it's been defunct for, I think, 6 months now, but really fascinating. It's still up if you guys want to go listen to it. It's Red Collar. But it was about white-collar criminals who get found out for their fraud and kill to essentially silence the people who bring them to task. Like, they find out what their fraud is and they lose it and kill them. And I'm just wondering if Brian was maybe perpetrating another fraud, even though he was under house arrest. The best idea, I personally think, that Ana Walshe is dead. And this is just my own opinion, and everybody out there right now has their opinion. But I think, unfortunately, Ana is dead. She probably died that night. And I kind of wonder if she was planning to leave him and take the kids. And I did a family annihilator case, a quasi family annihilator case for my first case of this podcast. And I did a lot of research into them. And they tend to be like, if I can't have you, nobody will sort of situation. But again, thank goodness the children were not harmed. So could this be like if I can't have you, nobody else will, and you can't take away my kids? But I guess we shall soon find out what happens. The way court cases go, it could be a year before we really get into what's going to happen to him. And he is still innocent until proven guilty, of course. And I'm sure there will be more information that comes out, and hopefully Ana will be found, because I'm sure her family must want to have her body and to be able to give her a proper burial. Again, this is my own personal opinion that I think she's dead, but it doesn't seem good for her. And it's not that her accounts have not been used. I don't think she just took off and disappeared. She had 3 little kids that she loved. And if all the photos on Facebook, you can just see the love she has for her kids. And strangely enough, her husband stops being in her social media posts around, I want to say, 2019, 2020. So he doesn't, it's just her, and they're glamour shots, or they are shots of her kids. Now, of course, with glamour shots, she is a high-powered businesswoman. I'm sure she wants to put her best foot forward on social media, not trying to throw any sort of shade on her in regards to that. We all do that because that's necessary for self-promotion in this day and age. But it is interesting that her husband is not in any of those. And yeah, we shall see what happens. As I said, this case has just been through all of the headlines here in the United States. And unfortunately, yeah, it's like the beautiful white woman murder case syndrome, where they get so many resources. But again, she has 3 little boys, and her family in Serbia just want to find her. And I hope they do. And I hope that I'm wrong and she is somewhere out there. But most cases like this don't turn out well. And we shall see what happens with Brian Walshe. I want to know more about that mom, Ana Walshe. Generational wealth is a very, very interesting term. And I saw that used in at least 2 or 3 articles. And yeah, it's fascinating to me, because you wonder, obviously he had a very difficult home life. He had a very difficult time with his dad. But now his mom is like, yeah, no, he can do no wrong. He's just a perfect son, and I will help him in any way. And that does something to boys and men, especially when they've gotten into so much legal trouble and have defrauded so many people. I will keep my eye on this case and post any updates as we go. And that is finally, after a month, that is the case of Ana Walshe. I will do my best to put out a podcast episode next week on the Idaho student murders, which is another massive case. And there's just new information coming out about that I'm really interested into diving into that case. And otherwise, thank you so much for listening. And I have a Patreon open, and I got my first Patreon. Thank you so much, Reed Russell. I so appreciate your support. Reed Russell was a cinematographer on a short film I did 20 years ago now, and it was really awesome to see that. Thank you, Reed Russell. Shout out to you. And I will see you next week with the Idaho student murders. All right, have a great week. Thanks, everybody. This episode was sponsored by The Creek Killer, book 1 in the Harriet Harper thriller series written by me, Dominika Best. What would you do if you read The Police Found Your Body in a Creek? Find out in The Creek Killer, available on Amazon. Thank you for joining me and listening to this episode. If you like my show, please give me a rating and review. It helps other listeners find this podcast. Follow Dominika Best Presents The Deviant Mind wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit thebeststorytellingnetwork.com, where you'll find show notes, my books, links to social media, and much more. Join my Patreon for special subscriber perks, like 2 extra exclusive episodes a month and a Q&A with me at patreon.com/The Deviant Mind Podcast. Until next time.